So tonight's conversation is going to be about protecting your ancestors' legacy and identity. You heard what I said. Protecting your ancestors' legacy and identity. So welcome to the Cotton Club Radio. I'm your host, Cotton Club, and let's talk about it. So why do I say protect your ancestors' legacy and identity? Family, we are living in a time where people from foreign places, either in Africa or in the Caribbean or wherever, they're just blatantly just trying to come into our country and hijack our history. I'm online, I'm on spaces, I'm hearing things, I'm hearing weird things that years ago were obvious, things that years ago people wouldn't even question. But now, I don't know why, but now, for probably a lot of reasons, probably ICE or whatever, people want to try to, be more Black American or claim more African American or whatever they want to do. Whereas before, nobody wanted to be African American or nobody wanted to be Black American. Everybody wanted to be their own separate ethnic group. Some strange reason, it's like our identity as Black Americans, foundational Black Americans, it's up for grabs. And people want to either claim it for themselves or they want to try to hijack our identity. Let me explain, family. I'm hearing the rumor that Seneca Village, I'm going to talk about this because I got to talk about this. I'm hearing the rumor that Seneca Village, a lot of Pan-Africanists and a lot of Africans are now coming out and saying that Seneca Village, which we know was a town in New York that was founded by free people of color, free Black Americans, and established and ran and constructed and facilitated as a modern town in its time. When I say modern, it had churches, it had stores, it had running water. It was a functional town. Now Africans are coming out and saying that Seneca Village wasn't actually called Seneca Village. They're saying that Seneca Village was called Senegal Village. Family, if they are not trying to hijack Black American history, let's talk about this because a lot of people may not know a lot about Seneca Village. And a lot of these Africans and Pan-Africans who are trying to hijack Black American foundational Black American history might not know a lot about Seneca Village. But let's debunk this in live time. Seneca Village was founded in 1825 by free people of color. I want to talk about some of those free people of color. One of them was Elbro Lyons. Elbro was a part Negro, part Native American person. His father was a Negro on a plantation, enslaved, and his mother was a Native American. Because Elbro's mother was a Native American, he was born free. You understand what I'm saying, family? A lot of people may not know, but there was a period in time where if you can prove that you had Native American ancestry, you couldn't be enslaved. You feel me? So Elbro's mother was Native American, so he was born free. Elbro Lyons found himself in New York, and he bought a plot of land, which would become later Seneca Village. And on this land, he raised 2 children, and he had a wife, and he was a very productive person. He was a businessman. He was a man of honor. And a lot of people don't understand that he was one of the reasons why Seneca Village was able to expand. He was an abolitionist. He worked with other abolitionists. He encouraged Black people who were running from slavery to come to Seneca Village. He was one of those kinds of people that if he saw you, if you were a Negro who was on the run, he was going to come holler at you. Yo, family, come over here. I know a place where you can, raise your family. Them folks that get off your back and you can be a productive member of society. Come on over here. You understand? This is before they were calling it Seneca Village. A brother by the name of Elbro Lyons. We're going to give these people names, family, because what happens is when you're dealing with these Africans and Pan Africans who start saying things like Seneca Village really meant Senegal Village, and that those weren't foundational Black Americans building up that town, those were really Africans building up that town. We got to give these people real names, family, and we got to give them a storyline so people can understand that this wasn't an African story. This was a Black American story. Albro's story was a Black American story. How many brothers do you know in that time whose parents were coming off of those plantations, whose mother was a Native American, whose father was a Negro off them plantations? He was born free. Let's move forward. Another brother who was one of the founders of Seneca Village, a brother by the name of Andrew Williams. His story is really interesting, family, because Andrew Williams is a native New Yorker. I'm going to say it again. Andrew Williams was a native New Yorker, meaning that he didn't come from the South. He was already in New York, family. He was in New York. He was a shoe shiner. And he was a brother just trying to make ends meet. Family, this brother who was a shoe shiner, this brother saved up at the time it was a lot of money. He saved up $125 to then buy 3 plots of land, which would later become Seneca Village. He bought 3 plots of land from a YT family by the name of John and Elizabeth Whitehead, who this YT family owned most of the land that is now Central Park, which would later become Seneca Village. They owned most of the land. They were, and the thing about this YT family, I don't know what was up with them, but they were selling a lot of the property to Black people. I don't know why. I don't know. Every now and again you get these John Brown types. You dig what I'm saying? Like these these type of YTs that you really can't explain it because there's such a diamond in the rough. There's such an abnormality. You don't really understand why they do what they do, but we're fortunate. We're fortunate for the Whiteheads giving Brother Williams an opportunity to purchase some land. So Brother Williams was a native New Yorker from New York. He didn't come from the South. He was in New York his entire whole life. The documentation that they have of this guy, they don't have him running from the South, running from a plantation. He wasn't enslaved. He was a free Black man in New York. Cool. See, the reason why I bring this up, family, is because they always give you this idea that in order for brothers to make do of themselves, they have to escape slavery and they have to make it to freedom, and then all of the glories of civilization happen. But this isn't Brother Andrew's story. His story is he was already a free man. He never was enslaved, and he was just in New York doing his thing, shoe shining and making money. So he gathered up $125, went to John and Elizabeth Whitehead and bought 3 plots of land, family. On these lands, he built homes. And as we start to look, we start to see the remnants of what would become Seneca Village starting to build. And the reason why I'm mentioning these 2 names is because they were the first people to purchase land that would be considered Seneca Village, family. So now that we got names on these people, so people can't claim it for themselves. So the Africans say that Seneca wasn't really Seneca, it was Senegal Village, and it wasn't really foundational Black Americans. It was Africans who started in that town in Seneca Village. Now we know that that's not true because we got names. Andrew Williams wasn't African. He was a Black American. You understand? Albro Lyons was not a African. He was a Black American, a foundational Black American. These are real people, family. We have to protect our ancestors' legacy. We have to protect their identity from what I call identity vultures. Identity vultures, family, are people who go around and they look for people who have great things about them. They go around people who have accomplishments. They go around people who have star power, stardom, and they create this idea that they and themselves are one of the same. So they can assume that person's identity and history. This is what many Africans are doing. So we have to be careful of these identity vultures because that's what they're doing. They said, well, the Black American is accomplished. The Black American has an astounding history, the rags to riches history that everybody wants. We have done the most amazing things and became victor even in that World War II, where we had to do the double V's, where we had to go to war to fight for our country, and and we had to fight for our right to be black, to be in our own skin. So when we went to war, we were fighting that double V. We had to come home to that double victory, fighting Jim Crow segregation and fighting war overseas. So we've always had to have a victorious spirit, a spirit that couldn't be conquered. This is the reason why we're still here today. But I want to talk about something else, family, why it's important to protect your ancestors' legacy and protect their identity, family. And why our story is an American story. It's not an African story. So for all the Africans, I hate to bust your bubble. You can't cross us out and say that, oh, those are Africans, which is what they like to do, is they like to look at Black American history and say, hold on, those weren't Black Americans, those were Africans. Well, let's talk about it. Let's talk about an American story and separate ourselves. We have to separate the two. Because for the identity vultures, you say African, we say foundational Black American. One of us is right and one of us is wrong. Let's look at Brother Lewis Latimer. Lewis Latimer, credit known for one of his greatest inventions, the carbon filament that created the light bulb to make it actually be a light bulb. Because before then, it was just an empty shell that couldn't light for more than 3 seconds. And then when Lewis Latimer created that carbon filament, it was able to light for an entire day. Lewis Latimer has an interesting story. His two parents escaped a Virginia plantation, went into Boston, and began to try to have some kind of decency in life. But then those fugitive slave acts started to enact, and his father got hemmed up. And he was about to be re-enslaved, family. Lewis Latimer's father was about to be re-enslaved. Guess who showed up? Frederick Douglass. A lot of people don't know this story. Frederick Douglass heard about a brother being hemmed up who escaped the Virginia plantation, and he came to see what's up. It was Lewis Latimer's father. He spoke to who he needed to speak to and paid $400 to buy that brother's freedom. Y'all ain't hearing me, family. Frederick Douglass paid for Lewis Latimer's father's freedom. So he was able to get back into Lewis Latimer's life and help him move into the direction that he needed to be a successful young man. Lewis Latimer was noticeably gifted at an early age. A lot of people don't know he was a poet. He was a musician. He could play the flute. And he was an amazing reader. He could read very well. Nobody even understood why. He just was one of those natural what they call autodidact, a self-taught individual. He actually, and a lot of people don't know, being an inventor was actually one of his third love. He didn't even really, that kind of sat in his lap. He actually wanted to be a poet. For those who don't know, he has a book of all his poems that his family published. It's called Love and Life by Lewis Latimer. To me, he was one of the first, I would say, Renaissance man, because he was a poet, he was a musician, and he was an autodidact. He was an intellect. You understand? Lewis Latimer was ahead of his time. And I believe that he actually, to be funky with you, they gave the telephone to Alex Graham Bell, but Lewis Latimer drafted up that blueprint to that telephone. A lot of people believe that he drafted up so well and so quick that it might have even been his. The reason why I bring up Lewis Latimer is because Lewis Latimer, that's a foundational Black American story, family. So for all the Africans trying to dig into Black American history and point out Black American things, you have to be careful, because our story is unique. His parents escaping that Virginia plantation to Boston is a Black American, foundational Black American story. Shall we continue? Let's talk about Madam C.J. Walker. Yeah, Cotton Club, keep talking. See, I got to bring this up. Madam C.J. Walker is extraordinary. I'm not going to say she was the first Black woman millionaire, because by doing so, I have to skip over Miss Annie Malone. And I ain't going to do that, not on this show. Because Madam C.J. Walker got the game from Miss Annie Malone, who was a millionaire. But for me, I think what Madam C.J. Walker was able to accomplish that Miss Annie Malone wasn't, was her Madam C.J. Walker's outstanding ability for marketing. She was a marketing genius. That's what she was. She was able to take something that Annie Malone did and take it to another level. She was able to become not just an entrepreneur, but a staple for Black excellence, for Black pride, for Black American sovereignty, to let people know that, yeah, you white tees are okay, but y'all don't do it the way we do it. You understand? And I'm going to tell y'all something that y'all might not know, family, about Madam C.J. Walker. Madam C.J. Walker, when constructing her mansion, which was her estate, she hired a architect, a chief master architect by the name of Veneer Tandy. Okay? And Veneer Woodsey Tandy, his story is interesting because his family came off those plantations. What are we seeing, family? This is the reason why we have to separate Black American stories, because our stories always, almost 100% include coming off a plantation. His father came off a plantation and his father was a builder. And that's why he became an architect. And while becoming an architect, Veneer and Madam C.J. Walker had a conversation, family. He asked her, how should I go about the interior of this estate, of this mansion? What should I do? What do you want to do as far as designing the interior of this mansion? You know what Madam C.J. Walker told him? She said, I want you to model my estate after the Renaissance, the Italian Renaissance in 14th century, where you had great philosophers, Shakespeare, etc. She wanted her estate to be modeled after those mansions that those Renaissance, the Italian Renaissance individuals had. She wanted her estate to be modeled after that, family. Why did she say that? Why did she tell Veneer, her chief architect, to model her estate after the Renaissance? Why didn't she say Africa? I believe, my opinion, is because she, growing up poor and growing up around YT, wealthy YTs, she was in those mansions. She was in those estates. And she saw the interior of their mansions, how they did the Renaissance, they did the Greco-Roman, they stole the ancient Kemetic interior, all of the stuff that they did, the wealthy YTs around her. And she said, you know what? One thing they lack substance. Renaissance was about enlightenment. These people aren't enlightened. The Renaissance period was about creativity. These people weren't creative. All they did was absorb and extract the resources out of us. They weren't creative. So she said, given the opportunity to put money behind me and be creative, I'm going to be creative. So Madam C.J. Walker modeled her estate and the interior after the Renaissance period. I thought that was incredible. I thought that was extraordinary because that was a foundational Black American move. Because one thing about us, family, if we're going to do it, we're going to do it right. We're going to do it better. We're going to do it to the maximal degree. So understanding that our stories, some come off of those plantations, Some of us are born free because of our indigenous ties. But one thing that is consistent about our stories that foreigners can't hijack is our ability to create in multiple spectrums and be multifaceted. That's one thing that foreigners can't recreate. They want it, but they can't do it. You look at all of the information I gave you, all of the individuals, all creative, all productive, all understanding that they had to innovate in a time of oppression and they couldn't have excuses. And most importantly, family, they couldn't run. They couldn't run. Are y'all hearing me? All of these stories, they intersect on one principle. They stayed. They stayed and made their situation better. They could have opted out. They could have ran. They could have left. Lewis Latimer's parents, when they was running away from that Virginia plantation to get to some freedom, they could have left the country. But they weren't going to leave their country. You understand? They weren't going to do that. The brother Andrew Williams, who helped found Seneca Village, he could have went somewhere else. You know, them YTs were in New York at that time. They were discriminated against him. They didn't want him to own property. He was subjected to shoe shining. But what did he do, family? He saved his bread. And then he went and bought 3 plots of land. And that would become later Seneca Village. One of the biggest factors of being a foundational Black American is staying and fighting and making our situation better, not running to where it's already better. But I also want to talk about that Seneca Village again. I want to talk more on that and how the idea that was called, that Africans and Pan-Africans are trying to say, oh, that wasn't Seneca Village, that was Senegal Village. Let's look at it. Even though I just gave y'all all the information, we know those were foundational Black Americans. The name Seneca is an indigenous name, family. Seneca is an indigenous name. There's a place upstate called Seneca Falls. There are tribes upstate called the Seneca tribes. These are indigenous people. So it wasn't a misnomer to call Seneca Village, when there were free people of color there who were formerly known as American Indian. So we have to understand, family, when we're dissecting these African lies or these foreigner lies, when they're trying to cross our name out and put themselves down and erase our history, when we're debunking their lies, it's important to know the real true history and know names, date, and places. Because they'll come and they'll say, oh no, those weren't Black Americans, those were Africans. But we got names. Andrew Williams, that's a Black American name. Albro Lyons, that's a Black American name. You understand? And all the other 300 occupants of Seneca Village. You know what I think? In Seneca Village, you had a church. I believe it was called the AME, the African something. A lot of abolitionists would use African something. So they would create an organization and call it African, Association of whatever. They would use these terms. But what a lot of people think is that they were saying they were African. They were not. They were just Renaissance men. They were men who were textured and cultured. So they were paying homage. Even the term African American, it wasn't really meant to be direct. The brother Jesse Jackson brought up the term and the Democrats were pushing it. Let's be fair. The Democrats were pushing his ass. They were pushing him to go that route. And he went that route. And he brought us African American, the term. He wasn't saying that we were African. They were just paying homage to some African ancestry. And Jesse Jackson himself was Cherokee. He was Choctaw. He wasn't African. Himself, he was Cherokee Choctaw. But every time it seems that we pay homage to Africa, it seems like for Africans, that's their point. That's their time to try to claim us or acclaim, something that we've done because we pay homage. One thing about Black Americans, family, we are not people who need to take credit for other people's things. You understand? We are not people who need to hijack other people's accomplishments. We are people who always look out for other people. We are people who always pay homage to other people, and we don't mind seeing other people shine. So when we put African in front of something, we didn't mean we were African. We were just paying homage to Africa because we've always felt bad for Africa. We've always felt like out of all the places in the world, Africa was being done dirty the most. You understand? And we've always said, you know what? We're not bullies. We're not going to just step on Africa. We see how these people do. No, we're going to lift up Africa and show love to Africa. That's why all of those African movement and Pan-African movements started by us and was highly moved forward by us because we've always been a people of paying homage. While these people attempt to try to cross us out of history and put themselves into history, while these people try to dissect our history, find points where they can assert themselves, we can look at Louisiana. You have a lot of Haitians trying to claim Louisiana. Louisiana has its own distinct culture. It's not a Haitian culture. It's a Black American culture. Are there some elements that some Haitians can say, okay, yeah, we do that too? Yeah, there's some elements in Black American culture that YT do, but we don't do it the same. You understand what I'm saying? So no, Louisiana isn't Haitian culture. It's Louisiana culture. And then you have South Carolina, where a lot of foreigners are trying to hijack and go in and assert themselves into Black American history. Because we know we got the Gullah Geechees down there. My father is from South Carolina. That line is Gullah Geechee. So you have a lot of foreigners who, are they feel like because South Carolina is so textured and so cultured, and there may be some remnants of what they believe to hear some Caribbean going on, but South Carolina is foundational Black American. It's very American culture. You see, the thing about South Carolina is that even even when you talk about Gullah and the language, Geechee, that whole intersection of culture there, it's very unique to South Carolina. You're not going to find a lot of that culture in the Caribbean because that amalgamation happened in South Carolina. It didn't happen in the Caribbean. You understand? You have hundreds and hundreds of years of people talking in that dialect, using culture in that way. You understand? Though it may have some similarities to some Caribbeans, but it's not patois. It's its own dialect. But some Caribbean people may hear it and say, oh, okay, that's where we can insert ourselves in and try to identity theft through South Carolina. So family, we have to be careful when we look all across the board and protecting our ancestors' legacy and culture. We have to understand what's most important is knowing the history. Knowing the history. We have to know our history so they can't assert themselves. You understand what I'm saying? So when people say, oh, a Haitian founded Chicago, we can say, not really. That brother was from Louisiana. He just spoke Creole. That's not, just because you speak Creole is not a prerequisite to call you a Haitian. Creole has multiple dialects, family. But some strange reason, Haitians feel like they have the package deal on Creole. That if you speak it, you got to be Haitian. And that's the biggest misnomer. It's so incorrect. It's nuts. That's like saying if you speak English, you got to be American or you got to be from England. You understand? When we know English has multiple variations. You have regional variations. You have colloquial, everyday language. You understand? You have cultural variations where people from different cultures, they both speak English, but it's a little different. You understand? So just like Creole, you have people from different cultures, they all speak Creole, but it's a little different. It has nothing to do with Haitian. They're not Haitians. But if people, can try to insert themselves in your history, they're doing that because they're banking on the fact that you don't know your history, family. They think we've been sitting here in this country for 500 years, 25 generations, and we don't know nothing. You understand? It's the ignorance of the foreigner. It's the idea that they think they're better, they think they're smarter, and they think that they have a higher capacity for intelligence. To think that Black Americans have been in their homeland for so long, we've been here so long, and we don't know nothing about where we are. So it's on us to protect our ancestors' legacy, protect our ancestors' lineage, and don't let people cross us out and put their names down. Don't let people say, those weren't Black Americans, those were Africans. Those weren't Black Americans, those were Haitians. That wasn't, Black Americans didn't create hip hop, Jamaicans did. Black Americans didn't create hip hop, Puerto Ricans did. Doesn't it all sound familiar? Why is that, family? Why us? Everybody seem to have their own thing, and we don't want no parts of it. They got a good thing going on. We don't want no parts of that. We don't claim merengue, even though we inspired merengue. We don't want reggae, even though we inspired reggae. We don't want mariachi, even though we inspired mariachi. We don't want none of these things because they ain't ours. We can understand that we've had some sort of influence and not want it because it's not ours. But why is it that everyone else wants a piece and they not asking, they just coming and taking? Everybody else just wants a piece of what we have. They can't just be okay with saying those American Negroes did that and it was great. So that inspired us. Why can't they just say that, family? They bank on our ignorance. And when we are intelligent and know the history, they default to just blatant lies. And then we're left to trolls. People who just want to hear themselves speak. And one thing that's for sure, family, if you don't protect your culture, no one will. No one will. If we don't stand on FBA business, no one will give a damn. If we didn't stop Puerto Ricans from saying they created hip hop, it would have just been a lie that was circulating around and nobody would have gave a damn. 50 years from now, they would have said Puerto Ricans created hip hop and them Negroes were just standing around scratching themselves. They would have said those Negroes were just, they were there. Those Negroes were there. Yeah, they were there. But they was itching and scratching and they wasn't doing nothing but just watching Puerto Ricans do their thing. 50 years from now, that's what they would have been saying. But we got in front of it, family. And we called a liar a liar. And we called their asses out. And now they ain't even talking no more. They quiet as a church mouse. That's what I'm talking about, family. So when we're protecting our ancestors' legacy and protecting our ancestors' culture, we got to do the same thing we did to the Puerto Ricans and the Jamaicans, where we got to call them out. We got to call the Africans out and say, how many generations does it take to be American? If we got 25 generations here in this country, 25 generations, 25, that's what you call lineage, family. They try to go with the nonsense. Well, if you got African DNA, then you're African. Well, I got European DNA too. Does that make me a European? Hell no. The logic doesn't logic with them. They just say anything. If we've been here for 25 generations, 25 long Generations, you give what? Each lifespan 30 years, 20 years. Generation. Constant culture, constant building, constant shared evolution and language, the way we talk, the way we walk, the way we think. Our energy is different than everybody else's because it's an energy that's been cultivated on this land, not in Africa, on this land. Why the Africans always saying those black Americans got attitude problems? We don't got attitude problems. We just don't take no shit. Why them Africans always saying those black Americans, they always walking around mean-faced. We not walking around mean-faced. We just ready for whatever. You better know who you talking to. And you better know who you've been living around. This is the problem. You people come here and you don't know nothing about us. You understand? We walk around because we ready for whatever. Because when you had to escape a plantation, and those laws, those fugitive slave act laws, those black codes, when you ran away from a plantation and you thought you were safe, you went to, say, Boston or New York or Pennsylvania or wherever, and then somebody point at you and say, hey, there he is, and you had to run, keep running, you're going to have a certain amount of energy about you that ain't going to be playing around. You ain't going to be BSing. You understand? We've had to live uncomfortable for too damn long. So we ready for whatever. This is what happens when you live in the battlefield. When you live in a constant state of war. This is what we had to go through. This is an American, black American story. It ain't no African story, fool. Are you nuts? Africans don't get down like black Americans. Just the way we walk. That diddy bop, that limp in the walk. That come from slavery. That's DNA. You understand? We just wanted to show those YTs we wasn't afraid of them. And we ain't want to be nothing like them. So what did we do? We just walk a little different. Just hit that little walk, that diddy bop on them. You understand? And what they say, screwing up their face. Walking like that. Yeah. We never cared. Because we've always been comfortable being us. And we ain't never wanted to be nobody else. And before I end this, I want to talk about that birthright citizenship. Because birthright citizenship, the 14th Amendment, was created for you and me, for foundational black Americans, in a time where they were trying to screw us over. They didn't want to give us our land rights. They'd gotten so powerful. The YTs gotten so powerful. They felt like there were no rights that we had that they had to respect. So they felt like they could do whatever, especially after that Civil War. And they were pissed off. The South was pissed off because you had people, YT people, who were called radical Republicans, who were saying, give those Negroes all of their land. They don't deserve nothing. All of them YTs who lost the Civil War, the Confederates, give the Negroes their land. And that pissed the Confederates off, that these radical Republicans, these YTs, who were Democrats at the time, they felt like, the Democrats at that time felt like the Negro wasn't about nothing, felt like the Negro deserved to be enslaved. And those radical Republicans, what did they do? They said, you know what? We need more black people in office, in political office. We need to give them rights. We need to make them certified citizens. So they drafted up that 14th Amendment and gave us birthright citizenship. Any of our children would be naturalized. That was for us. And I thank those radical Republicans, those YTs. We don't see every once in a while, you get a John Brown with them, like I talked about you before with the Seneca Village, where you got John and Elizabeth Whitehead, who was able to, they sold a lot of those black people property. They gave them land plots. And that's what started Seneca Village. They gave black people the right to own some land. They was giving them land, those YTs. So here we are again. You get those radical Republicans who were looking out for black folk. It didn't last long, but they were looking out for a little while. And that's how we got that 14th Amendment under them. After we got that birthright citizenship, that 14th Amendment, then you had these, the Democrats at the time, which were the Dixiecrats, which were the KKK and all of those individuals. They wanted to figure out a way to nullify it. So what did they do? They started to go in there and started to tamper with that 14th Amendment by misinterpreting it and making it more corporate. They said that persons in that 14th Amendment, where it said a person has the right to citizenship, they said, well, you know what? That person can mean anything. It can mean a corporation. A corporation is a person. And when they did that, they opened up the loophole for misinterpretation. And this loophole turned into a black hole. And it's been misinterpreted ever since. Ever since those wealthy Dixiecrats started to tamper with that 14th Amendment and started making it about corporations and less about a group of people who needed it, that's when the loophole started getting real loose. And then all of a sudden, it applied to everybody. Immigrants, they can just come over here. They don't even have to be citizens, just have a child, and that child is an American citizen. That's preposterous. The 14th Amendment never meant none of that. But when you tamper with something long enough, when you tamper with a lock and you keep tampering with it, eventually you break that lock. And then when you try to put another key in that lock, it don't work no more. That's what the 14th Amendment did. That's what tampering with it did. It made it so much so that it's almost useless. Yeah, it still protects our birthrights, but it was supposed to be for us. But if it's for corporations and immigrants, then what good is it? It's for everybody. It ain't even for us no more.
King. Look. Let your angels sing. I ain't twisted, this ain't the Henny talking for me. This is literally Malcolm Little talking through me. I ain't possessed, this is just when spirit meets the flesh. And a revolutionary is born, nothing less. It's hard for me to cope with stress, especially when I see the world much different from the rest. I can't sleep, nightmares, waking up, cold sweat. Wondering if I ever made it, will they do me like the rest? It's for my black souls who really too upset to rest. So they wander through my dreams, please tell me what this means.
Club Radio.